Hi, everybody. So, welcome. If you've seen us try to introduce ourselves before, it is Lucy Dahl and Elizabeth from the Matilda Book Club. Hello.
Hello.
We're having some Google challenges this afternoon, so apologies for that. And if you heard us gossiping, you're welcome. Please enjoy the gossip. So
even Google is human, right?
That's right. It's not just robots after all. They are human too. So we are here today to talk about more about Boy, which is this month's book club book. And Lucy has her copy. I have my copy right here.
I do.
So for all those kids who have been doing their homework and been asking questions of Lucy Dahl, this is your lucky day because Lucy's going to answer them all right now. So we are going to start with a question from Taylor Keller. And Taylor asks Lucy, of all the amazing family members, teachers in Roald Dahl's life, who became characters in his books that you remember?
Hello, Taylor, first of all. That's a great question. I would say, obviously, I think you would all agree that the teachers, and certainly in this book there's a whole chapter on the matron, but on a more personal level, certainly in The Witches, the little boy's grandmother is definitely based on his mother, on my father's mother, who he was very close to, who is a wonderful Norwegian woman who he writes about in More About Boy. And also Danny the Champion of the World, he based Danny's father on himself. So if you want to know what it was like having Roald Dahl as a dad, read Danny the Champion of the World, because that's what it was like. That was him.
That's so cool. I mean, you mentioned Norwegian grandmother, and that does bring up a point, because the holidays that they took to the island in Norway was a big part of the story in More About Boy. And did they ever bring you to Norway, back to the place of the island?
We had so much of our childhood. My childhood was exactly the same, really, as my dad's childhood, just in a different generation. We spent all of our summers going to Norway. We stayed in a hotel called the Strand Hotel, and there was four of us children, my mother and my father. And my father would say that it was too expensive to have lunch at the hotel every day, and I have a lot of children too, and I'll concur with that. So instead of us all having lunch at the hotel, we would all pile, like in going to Norway, we would all pile in a motorboat, and my father would drive us out to sea with our fishing poles. Our destination was a small island with nothing on it, exactly the same as in the book, and we would fish on the way to the island. And if we didn't catch any fish, we didn't have any lunch. And if we did catch a fish, which we usually did, the odds were usually pretty good. We would build a fire and we would cook the fish over the fire. If we didn't catch fish, there were often mussels clinging to the rocks, and so we would forage for those. But we didn't, it was wonderful. It was wonderful.
That's amazing. It's like our version of minivan vacations with like peanut butter and jelly, except you have fresh seafood to eat and sunny rocks to sit on. That sounds pretty amazing.
Yes. Well, my husband and I have a house up in the San Juan Islands in Washington, and we catch crabs, which is really fun.
That's amazing. So speaking of all piling into the family car, there is a really gruesome passage in the book about the first vehicle that his family owned, and the elderly sister. Is that what he calls her? The ancient sister.
The ancient sister.
I think it's hysterical because she's like 16 or something. The ancient sister is the only one who can drive this car, and they end up crashing it and nearly slicing his face off. Do you remember him telling you this story, and do you have your own car adventure stories to tell us?
Yes. Very much so. And again, I think that his childhood was so fabulous to him that he wanted us to have the same experiences. And Ulf was always called the ancient sister. His sisters lived close to us, which we can touch on again if you want. But she was the oldest, and she was the ancient one. But my father, he bought an old Morris Minor, which is a very sort of, I would say today it was the most similarly to a bug. And he bought an old clapped out Morris Minor, and he had the local farmer who was his friend, come with a big bulldozer and bulldoze a road in our orchard, where the BFG lived under a tree in the orchard.
Right.
Also another story. But he bulldozed a road, and we weren't even old enough. We were barely old enough to touch the pedals of this car. And he basically just put the car in the orchard and gave us the keys and set us loose. And my sisters and brother and I spent hours and hours and days and evenings just careering around the orchard as fast as we could. And he would say, if you hit something, you'll hit a tree, and good luck to you. And that was basically how he was. So I think that his experience led us to our own.
So he wasn't in the car with you? He just let you drive the car around?
No. He believed that children should not be boring. They should all have adventure, and they should be sparky. And we had full reign. I was the youngest. My sister Ophelia, she claimed the wheel the most, and my brother would sit in the front and I would sit in the back. But
oh my God,
it was a lot of fun. In fact, my father should have be careful what he wished for, because one time Ophelia, she'll probably shoot me for saying this, but anyway, she took my father's actual car when he was having a nap one afternoon, and she drove it to the next door village and back again, and she didn't think she would get caught because she was about 12 and he taught her how to drive, and she ran out of gas. And so she had to call him from a phone box and tell him that she'd run out of gas, and it wasn't fun waking him up for a nap in the first place. So anyway, that's
So it was waking up from a nap to say, I've stolen the car, I ran out of gas, by the way, can you come get me?
Yes. But he used to tell us, he used to say, I know you're going to be naughty, and I know you're going to do these things. And that actually doesn't make me angry, because I know that that's normal. What makes me cross, the English version of angry, is that you're stupid enough to get caught. and that's what made him cross about Ophelia taking the car, that she was stupid enough to not check the gas and get caught.
That's fair enough. That's just logic. I understand totally. Oh gosh. So another question that comes to us from someone who calls themselves Holly Golightly. So we'll see. I know.
My mother was in Breakfast at Tiffany's.
Oh, that's right, of course. Oh my, well, this is appropriate. Which of your father's books did you read first? Now, we know from the last time we talked that he would try out a lot of the stories on you guys at, like, bedtime. But when they were actually published, which of the ones currently would you say? Or you read first? Fantastic
Mr. Fox was the one that I read first, and I would say that was a pretty solid memory. You wonder how old you are. I mean, I wonder, all of you out there who can remember what the first book they read was. I wonder if Holly Golightly remembers what her first book was. I'd be interested to know.
Me too. Yeah, Holly Golightly, if you're out there, please hashtag and answer our questions to you.
Yes. What was the first book that you read?
Oh gosh. So we talked about our your great vacations. The thing that I think is so incredible in the book is, again, he talks about writing letters and how important that was to write letters to and from his mother every single week, like religiously almost. And he always signed them Boy, because that was his nickname. Do you have a nickname that they would call you?
We all had nicknames. My older sister Tessa, her nickname was Teddy Bear. Also known as Teddy, and Theo was Titi, and Ophelia was Minnie. She was actually Don Minnie, which is the head min pin. And mine was Lukey, and I don't know why he gave us nicknames, but we all had nicknames. It's like the ancient aunt.
Yes.
And then when we got older and we had boyfriends and we brought boyfriends home, the boyfriends all got nicknames. I mean, My stepsister had a boyfriend, and he was nicknamed the Lovesick Parrot. Everyone always had a nickname.
It just saves time.
Yes.
It's also easier than describing somebody like, oh, the funny-looking guy. Yeah, exactly. And it's more polite. Parrot is much nicer than guy with the big nose, so that's just appropriate.
You're right. It is.
So the other thing that comes up a lot in this book are these bouts of illness that are treated with absolutely no medicine and really terrifying old school instrumentation. Horrible, really amazing. And it includes actually one sort of scare about appendicitis that gets him sent home from boarding school for the first time because he's so homesick he needs to find a way to get home. Were there any bouts of appendicitis from your end of things?
Well, the thing is when you go to boarding school, and my father, obviously because of this book, that he went to boarding school and was desperately homesick, and I was the same. In fact, I remember being in the car with my father, being driven to school, to boarding school for the first time, and I said to him, "Why do I have to go? I don't want to go." And he said to me, "I don't want you to go either, but you have to go because it's going to toughen you up." So again, he was giving us his childhood.
Yes, exactly.
But I was desperately homesick. I really was homesick a lot, and we weren't allowed to telephone. We were allowed to telephone about once every 2 or 3 weeks, and then you had to have a payphone and put the money in.
Like prison.
Yeah, I don't know. I've never been to prison.
I wouldn't know either. That's ridiculous. What are you insinuating? Jeez.
But I was I had no idea that my father was a big hypochondriac when he was a child in order to get out of school. But since reading this book, I know that he was, and the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. I was the same. I faked my appendicitis, and I had my appendix taken out when I didn't really have an appendicitis.
Oh, did they not understand you were faking?
No, because I'm 47 and I was about 15, and then they didn't have all those wonderful ultrasound machines that they have now. They just used to poke you, and I would scream on command, and they went in and took my appendix out. But I do remember waking up from the anesthetic and them still poking me and me saying, "Ow," and they said, "Well, your appendix wasn't swollen, so we're trying to find out what was wrong with you." I think at that point, I think I had to tell them.
It's amazing. I mean, lucky was only that and not something you really needed, for crying out loud.
Well, my dad, I also faked headaches. I did a lot of stuff because I wanted to go home. And, from a psychological point of view, as a father, I think that he knew what I was doing. He never told me that he did the same thing because I think that would have made it okay.
Totally.
But since then, I've learned that he did.
That's amazing.
But don't do this at home. I wouldn't.
Of course not.
I wouldn't suggest it. It's
ridiculous.
Very painful.
I used to do it all the time. I mean, not to the point of hospitalization, but every Sunday, like, I don't want to go to school. I'm going to sleep on top of this rock until they send me home. You can find ways around it. So it sounds like he had this sort of lifetime obsession, not obsession, but love, true deep love of candy and sweets.
Yes, he did. Not candy, chocolate. Only chocolate. Because
there are great passages about when he was first going to school and passing by this candy shop where this nasty old lady worked, and having pennies to spend on sherbet suckers or licorice bootlaces, things like that.
Yes, Mrs. Pratchett. But also, you're right. I'm wrong. You're right. He did love candy, sweets as we called them, when he was young. But as he matured and his palate matured, he liked chocolate.
What was his favorite when he was older?
His favorite chocolate.
The favorite chocolate, yeah.
It's the I would have to say the Cadbury's Dairy Milk.
It's classic.
It is classic, and he liked Kit Kats, and he liked Mars bars, and he liked, there was something in England called a Curly Whirly, and he liked all of those. But a good piece of chocolate, I don't think anything beats a good piece of just a block of chocolate.
It really is the best thing ever. Did you inherit the sweet tooth, would you say?
Yes, I still like a nice bit of chocolate.
Who doesn't?
In fact, when my father died and his coffin was lowered into the ground, and in it we put chocolate.
Like on top instead of flowers?
Yes. Well, no. In the ground before the soil went in, we put chocolate, red wine, his writing pencils, and cigarettes, because he likes smoke.
That's a good send-off. Listen, if you're going to go, that's the way to go.
And don't do that at home either.
Of course not.
No.
But, you know, it's a good point. It's a good point. No smoking, kids. No smoking. Golly, Ned.
But then it was very fashionable to smoke. Everybody smoked in those days.
Well, the doctors did, for crying out loud.
Yeah, they did.
And they told you to. So there's also that. So we do have a question from another fan, Mark Howard, who asked about bedtime stories, which we talked a little bit about last time, about how he used to, you know, sort of pre-screen his stories to you guys before you went to sleep. But have you thought about putting them into like a book, the ones that didn't make it into actual publication?
No, I haven't, and I'll tell you why. Well, I have, and I'll tell you why I haven't. And if that's the Mark Howard that I know, hello, Mark Howard.
Oh, is it?
It might be a friend of my brother and sister. But if Mrs. Frinlaw, similarly to the BFG, I may have told you that the BFG was our bedroom story when we were growing up. And I have to say, when the BFG got published into a book, I was mildly annoyed that I felt like my story was now no longer mine. It was every other child's as well. And there was, I got over it, obviously.
Sure.
But there's something, I think, that's sacred about your own father, that's private, that you keep that private stuff that's yours. And I think it's when you have a father who's a public figure, there are some things that are sacred to hold on to that are yours, that are all about the heart rather than anything else. So selfishly, I'm keeping them to myself. Good
for you. I would too, totally. I'm none of your business, Mark Howard. Jeez. You tell him I said so.
I will, if it's the same Mark Howard. And if it's not, sorry, Mark Howard.
Sorry, other Mark Howard. This is awkward. Oops. Oh, golly. So we were, you know, he spent such a great amount of time telling you stories that turned into books. Were there any stories about his life, sort of like outside of his writing hut, that he would tell you, maybe about, you know, his adventures?
Yes.
Or like the war.
Yes. Yes. He actually would say that the Second World War, where he was a pilot, were the most exciting years of his life. That he absolutely loved being up in the sky and having other planes shooting at him, and people do video games for that excitement, but for him, it was real life. But he was a fabricator, and he was a great storyteller, and he had always told us that. Well, we always knew that he had a bad back, and he used to be 6'6", and he lost a few inches in his spine due to a plane crash that he had in the Second World War, and he told us that he had been shot down. The story was always the same, that he had been shot down in the war by the enemy, and that he barely lived, and it was a fabulous, fantastic, adventurous story. Anyway, after he died, some research was done on his life to write a biography about him, and it's the person that was doing the research looked at all the logs from, you know, his pilot log books and the logs from the war and everything. Anyway, it turns out that he wasn't shot down. He ran out of gas.
What? Are you kidding?
No, he ran out in the truth is, but it's kind of wonderful because he always he had a fantastic imagination, and he always made something fabulous out of any situation, whether it be good or bad.
Right. But that's, I mean, it's so full circle, the fact that Ophelia would run out of gas in her car.
Oh, well, that's true.
He would turn that plane thing into like, oh, we shot down. Like, what?
And he would say,
plane gas?
He would say, you mustn't get caught. And I suppose in his lifetime, he never did get caught for running out of gas.
That's right, only after the fact. So
yes, but it didn't matter.
That's amazing.
After he had his wine and his chocolate in his coffin.
Thank you very much. I'll take that. Yoink. Were there any other things you can think of that do the same thing, that we've taken an ordinary situation and turn it into something more fantastic? Or
he always used to say, if you're going to tell a story, you may as well make it a good one. So even, at the dinner table, if he was saying something that happened during that day, like he took the dogs for a walk, and I'm just fabricating here, and a wolf came out and almost ravaged the dog, and he ran after the wolf and he saved the dog, and he was always doing things like that, whereas really in actual fact what happened is probably the dog got in a dog fight with another dog or something. But
right.
And I think it's a fun way to live your life, because it's not really not telling the truth. It's having a good imagination, which is cool.
Oh, that's essential. I mean, it's especially if you grow up in a small town where you can get really bored, especially kids. Like, I have nothing to do. What do I do? Or play video games. That's it. And having an imagination like that, like taking a dog for a walk into a cool adventure is, fib away, if that's what fibbing is. It's super, super cool. That's awesome. Oh, I love it. I love it. All right. Let's see if we have any other fans who want to live. Just a reminder, while we're talking, you can always ask questions live at #AskLucyDahl. So this is your last call. That's it. And then we'll start gossiping again. So you don't want that. I did want to talk. You mentioned that you grew up really within close proximity to your aunts, his sisters, yeah? Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And how much time did you get to really hang out with them? I mean, did you have regular dinners, or getting to know them better?
It was I had 3 aunts. I had the ancient aunt of, mm-hmm. and Elsa, who we called Sasa, and Asta. And they used to come over all the time. They used to come over for supper at least once a week, maybe twice a week. And they would roar with laughter about all kinds of things. And then when they talked about things that they didn't want to hear, they would talk to us in Norwegian. They would, talk to each other in Norwegian. And we didn't know what they were talking about. So that was their secret language.
That's amazing. Did you guys ever think you were going to teach yourself so you could figure out what they were talking about?
My sister Ophelia did, actually, because we used to go to Norway in the summers, and she used to try really hard to learn as much as she possibly could. But smart. When you're a child and you sneak out of bed and you sit at the top of the stairs or whatever and you listen to what your parents are saying,
yes.
We knew that we were caught whenever we were out of bed listening, because they would suddenly break into Norwegian.
So they could see your feet at the stairs and just
somehow we were busted. Yes.
Think you're so sneaky, then you get caught. I see how it is. That's so funny. Oh golly. Great. Well, thank you so much, Lucy, and thank you for everybody. I know we were a little late today, and perhaps you heard us talking about our breakfast food earlier. So please enjoy that. We also had great news at Matilda this week. We were nominated, the musical was nominated for 12 Tony Awards, so we're very excited about that. Lots of big news for the show, and the next big news is next month's book club book.
Oh, what is it?
Oh, well, since you asked me, I'm going to show you.
Yes.
Here it is. Drum roll. The Witches!
The Witches, yay! Yay. Good.
Speaking of, somebody who was based on, somebody that Roald Dahl knew and loved, his mother. Not that this would be his mother. That's awful. Anyway, very excited about The Witches, and of course, one of our personal favorites here at Matilda. So that will be great. So please, everyone, read The Witches. And Lucy, thank you, as always, for being with us today.
You're very welcome. It was fun, and it was also nice to meet you for real when I met you and I met everybody.
At the opening night for the show.
Yeah, that was great fun.
See, and now you know, everybody, that we're real humans. We're not just paid actors. We have real human conversations. So everyone, please read The Witches, and we'll see you next month. And don't forget to send your questions about The Witches to #AskLucyDahl. And we'll see you in 30 days.
Yay.
Bye, everybody.